So how did you choose to come to Miami University?
The reason I chose to come to Miami University is actually, I think, kind of unique in a way. I was really set on another school, Indiana University. They have a really great business program. It's in the top 10 in the country. I was so set on it. I went to go visit there, and I loved all the professors and the people that I met. And I was just absolutely set on it. I wanted nothing more out of life than to go to that school. I got my scholarship information back, and it wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be. And my guidance counselor in high school actually told me to apply to Miami because they also have a great business program, but they tend to give more scholarships. So it's like, okay, I don't feel like going to Florida, but I can do that. And she said, no, it's in Ohio. Once I got past that, I decided to apply anyway. And I, got both scholarship letters. Miami offered me more. And I still said, no, I'm going to IU. I don't care. I'll take loans. Whatever needs to happen will happen. I need to go to IU. So I actually went to go visit IU, and I, went to their business school, and I met all their professors, and it was just like time of my life. Me and my dad got in the car afterwards. He said, we're going to pass Miami anyway on the way home. Why don't you just go and visit? You got in, you might as well, right? So I said, kind of begrudgingly, I was like, yeah, no, fine, we'll go, just because you're forcing me against my will. And I got a private tour of Farmer. And yeah, it was beautiful and everything, but it compared to IU in every single way. It, was competitive. It was a really great program, but it also had smaller class sizes. And that was huge for me. I wanted my professors to know my name. I wanted to know other students in my classes. It was just really important for me to, be a person rather than a number. And still though, I loved Miami, but I was very much set on IU. So I actually sent the dean of IU Business School a handwritten 2-page letter. And I said, I love your school. I'd be an asset for your school. I will do anything it takes. I just need more scholarship money to make this worth my while. Farmer is my second choice. And Farmer, is big competition for IU. So she actually did end up giving me an extra scholarship from that letter. And yet I kind of thought back to my experience at Miami, and I thought that I'd get a lot more out of Farmer than I would at Kelly at the end of the day, being, again, a person, not a number. So I actually ended up accepting with Miami, and that's how I ended up here.
Well, that's cool. What's your major and how did you choose it?
What's my major and how did I choose it? So I'm a supply chain major. I'm minoring in corporate entrepreneurship. The reason I chose it was, it's funny. I'm actually one of the very few people that came into college as a supply chain major. I think a lot of people come into college as marketing or finance or, something that everybody knows about. And at the time, this is pre-COVID, nobody knew what supply chain was. But it was becoming a huge field, right? So Amazon was really taking off and fulfillment was huge, and getting to delivery was a massive deal to everybody. So, I talked about it with my dad, and he said, you might as well at least try it. It's a huge marketable field. You'll be able to get a job out of college. That's really all you want. Why don't you just do that? Because you're not super passionate about anything either way. You might as well try it. And then, of course, COVID hit, and it was, obviously horrifying to be home for a year, but it made me realize how important that major was and what a phenomenal decision I had made, because I already started taking my classes. I was ahead of the curve, and I actually ended up really loving it. Being kind of analytical and organized is a huge thing for me, and supply chain really fulfills all of that. And there's so much you can do coming out of college with that. You could be in procurement, you can be in buying, you can be in logistics, transportation. You can be in nearly anything, and they're all going to be major functions of every business that you decide to be a part of. And I just chose entrepreneurship because I wanted to kind of combine the analytics with, a more creative field, something that, I can own for myself and kind of transfer those skills into a more kind of numbers and analytics based job. It's actually worked out really well for me. So I'm glad I chose that combination.
Has that major gotten you any cool internships or anything?
Actually, yes. Funny that you ask. So I'm obviously a senior here, but the summer after my sophomore year, I interned for Amazon. I was an area manager intern. So it's not necessarily very cool, but I actually worked in a fulfillment center, and that's obviously not something that I wanted to do as a career. I'm more of an office kind of cubicle person. But I spent my entire summer in a fulfillment center where I was working on their quality standards, and I was learning all about how Amazon's central function works. How do you get to a delivery? How do you organize an entire fulfillment center? How do you pick, pack, stow? It was a really cool experience. I would never do it again. It made me miserable at the time, but I look back on it now, and I am so far ahead of everybody else in that aspect. And at the end of the day, if you need to move any items, you also need to store items. So understanding how the best company in the world does it has been a huge asset to me. So it actually worked out really well. And then the summer after that, so last summer, I interned for Walmart at their headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, middle of absolutely nowhere. And I thought I would be miserable there too, but it actually ended up being one of the best decisions I've ever made. It actually set the scene for the rest of my career. I found out what buying and merchandising was, and the idea of creating SKUs and understanding, how Walmart functions and what products they get, how they negotiate their prices. And at the end of the day, Walmart sets the national standard for pricing on just about anything. So kind of having that control and having that power and being the central function of, again, what a Fortune 1 company does, I fell in love with it, and I actually accepted my offer, and I'll be going there full time. And you know what? You'd be surprised. Bentonville is actually a really great place to live, and I'm very, very happy with my decision.
Well, congratulations, Diana.
Thank you.
Hey, Diana.
Yeah.
How did we meet?
How did we meet? Oh, Caitlin, what a great story. We actually met under the most bizarre of circumstances, I think. I was actually friends. Well, I was social chair for my sorority, and I had a co-chair, some crazy girl named Lauren Holland, and I did not know her at all when we first started the position, but we really started right at the beginning of COVID. So how do you be a social chair, and how do you generate, any kind of relationships between people when you're miles and miles apart? I mean, it was astounding to me that we made it happen, but we ended up being on FaceTime calls literally every moment of every day, the entire time we were in COVID. So we became very, very close. It was funny. I was walking to one of our events we were putting on, and I looked across the street and I see another one of our friends. Her name is Maddie. And we had, one class together. It was accounting, and I didn't even realize that it was her. But I turned around and I saw her, and I needed a mask, and I was running this event. So I couldn't be late, and I couldn't not show up. So I was going to ask some stranger on the street. Luckily enough, I found Maddie on the street instead. And, running out of the house as I scream, "Maddie," across the street, and run up and give her a hug, which is crazy because we had met maybe like 5 times at this point. But run across the street, give her a big hug, and who comes out of the door but Lauren, who I've gotten really close with. I had no idea she was there. She goes barely into a hug, and then behind her is a completely random human being that I now know is Caitlin Edenfield. And it was crazy. It was almost perfect in a way that it was completely accidental. But you and I just kind of clicked in the craziest, most organic way possible, where if we weren't in this sorority together, if we hadn't made that decision and we hadn't known similar people, and I hadn't been on that street corner at that exact moment when you guys were walking out of a house, we never would have met. And it's probably one of the biggest things that I'm grateful for in my life, that I was on that corner that day. So it was just a crazy circumstance, but I love it. And it's one of my favorite stories to tell.
You said you were a social chair for Kappa Delta. How did you choose Kappa Delta over all of the other sororities your freshman year?
I mean, I think that the biggest reason I chose Kappa Delta was because I saw myself in a lot of the older sisters that were there. I actually came into college and I had no intention of joining a sorority. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not a very sorority kind of gal. That was just never my intention, never anything that I even considered. I always made fun of people. You pay for your friends, like all the usual things you hear about sororities. And, funny enough, I was rooming with somebody who actually lives with me now. We've been roommates now for 3 years, but she, convinced me. She said, "Diana, you're outgoing, you're extroverted, you love talking to people. You might as well go through recruitment. And if you hate it, you can always drop out and never be in a sorority again." And it's actually the funniest thing in the world is that, we would come home every day and she would be exhausted and her feet would hurt and she would complain and she'd be so upset because the days were long. I mean, we were there for 12 hours at a time, going back and forth between buildings. It was snowing, it was sleeting, it was disgusting. So she used to be miserable coming home to our room freshman year. And I came home like bull in a china shop, so excited, so energized. I met like 60 girls today. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. I met this person, they asked me these questions, I talked about this, and it was so cool. So obviously I loved recruitment, and I was dead set on being in a sorority after that. I mean, even after the first week of recruitment, I said, this is for me. I want to meet girls that I can really vibe with and I can see as my lifelong friends. That whole bridesmaid thing, I still kind of thought it was a hoax, but I wanted it, and I was really dead set on getting it. So I went through recruitment, and I ended up loving a lot of sororities, and they were all very different, which is very interesting. I'm a chameleon in a lot of ways where I can adjust to any situation that I'm in. So I think that, I had to take stock of in which places that I was most myself versus places that I was putting on a show to, kind of make a good impression or make myself feel like I belong somewhere. And I think that was a huge pivotal moment in who I am, was understanding, who do I see here where I don't feel like I need to be somebody else? I can be myself, be comfortable, and be happy doing that. And so, I don't know. I went into Kappa Delta and I absolutely adored it. It was phenomenal. I met an older sister. She was a, I believe she was a junior at the time. I was a freshman. And her name was Madeline Conroy, and she just kind of took me under her wing. She made me laugh. She was so, driven and excited. She was in business. It was just awesome. So I wanted to be her when I grew up, and I thought, if I can be anywhere near her and be anything like her, I'd be happy to do that. And I'm happy I made that decision.
Well, thank you, Diana.
Oh, anytime, Caitlin. Glad I could help.
And now you can stop it.